Good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Today we are learning Maseches, Sanhedrin, Daf Yud Gimel, and we are starting um, 3 lines into the wide lines on Daf Yud Beis Mid Beis. Those of you who know astronomy very well and who know math very well, which is maybe one of us, maybe, is not me. So I had to work very hard to read the basic words here. So I'll be adding in what some of the commentaries have spoken about, but as a precursor to today, something fundamental to know about is that we know, of course, in the solar year that there are 4 seasons, and each of those days span some 91 days, and they all turn on solstices, and that's kind of how the seasons shift around from one to the next, but they last about 91 days. So let's just remember that as we navigate. 91 times 4 is 364 plus-ish days, which is 365. So really it's 91 and a quarter-ish, because it's not exactly 365 days. I believe it's 365 and a quarter. 0.25. So, okay, so let's say it's 0.3 instead of 0.25. That's how long a tkufa is. That's the language of the Gemara for a season is a tkufa. And we'll get into this momentarily. But first, let's clean up some of the stuff that we started with yesterday. The Gemara says 3 lines down, Reb Shimon ben Yehuda Omer Mishum Reb Shimon, he says, Mibnei Shehisias Yisrael Lasos Pesach Sheni. If you'll recall yesterday, we had Chizkiyahu showing some regret that he had delayed Pesach one year. And the Gemara says, Hey Chidami, what were the details of the delay of game? Why did he postpone Pesach that year? Why did he add an Adar Beis? So the Gemara says, Amar Rav Ashi, Kigon Shahayu Yisrael Mechza Tzmeim u'Mechza Tzahorim. When it came to the population of the men, 50-50 in regards to Tameh and Tahor. I guess they knew by clothing. I don't know. The mamish on the line. Punk. It's exactly 50-50. The Nashim mashlimos letahorim ve'odfos alehem. But of the women folk, there was more than 50% that were tahoros, which is stam. It's always close. You're saying you're talking about nida. It's always close. But the Gemara says, Meikara, initially Chizkiyahu was savar that Nashim Berishon Chova, that the obligation for a woman to bring the korban on time was a chova. Dahavu mi'utan tmein umi'utan midchu Pesach sheni. A very small percentage of them were tmein, and those people would have been postponed to a Pesach sheni. But ulevesov savar Nashim Berishon Rishus. In the end, he held no, that when it came to women, that it's a rishus that they should do it on the regular Nisan month, not Pesach Sheni. Davalhu tmein ruba, the ruba lo mitchu Pesach Sheni. So really, what was going on with Chizkiah was this, I guess, an internal struggle. I don't know. He was the posek achron, he was a navi, and he was trying to decide are nashim part of the typical count of tmeim when we try to figure out if there's rove. If there's rove, we don't push things off. But if there isn't a rove, then we do push things off. So that's what the Gemara is kind of debating back and forth here, and that is how we now understand Chizkiah's concerns. The Gemara says 9 lines from the bottom gufa. Amar Shmuel, we had said, Ein me'aber nes hashana b'yom shloshim shel adar hoel v'roi lekova b'nisan. We had said this idea yesterday, that you're not allowed to be me'aber on the 30th day of the month of Adar. Why? Because not every Adar has 30 days. So in previous years, and maybe in future years, that 30th day, what we call Lamed Adar, in another year, could have been Aleph Nisan. But once you tip the scales into Aleph Nisan, and seemingly even theoretically so, that's no longer eligible for being Me'aber. So it says the Gemara, Ibru Hamai, what if you broke the rules on Lamed Nisan and you were Me'aber? Amar Ula, in Mekachin es a Chodesh. This language is very, very not clear. I mean, it's clear for the wise people. So if you look at Rashi, it says over here, Ein Mekachin es a Chodesh lomar mekudash. You're not allowed to say and sanctify that this, in fact, is a new month. You're not allowed to do that, but it still does function as a me'ubar. It does. The month is now me'ubar. However, Kidshumai, what if you did publicize it and you were Makadesh it properly? So then, says the Gemara, no dai samarabba batel ha'ibor, Rav Nachman amar me'ubar mekudash. So we have a machlokas over here. If on the 30th of the month of Adar, one was forcing to try and make it me'ubar, and they did so by being mekadesh, by publicly making a whole stink about it. That we're being mekadesh, and it's another adar. So that's a machlokas achronim. Amarle Rav Nachman Michti. Let's analyze this. Mipuria lepischa tlasin yom and havu. From Purim until Pesach is 30 days. Umipuria, and from Purim, which is 30 days prior to Pesach, darshinan b'hilchos Pesach. This is not new. We've learned this idea before in Shas a number of times. Titania, as the Brisa told us in Megillah, in Psachim, in Rosh Hashanah, we will soon see in Avodah Zarah and in Bechoros, and obviously over here, Shalin b'hilchos Pesach, kodem lePesach, shloshim yom, that when it comes to a holiday, we always are obligated to learn 30 days prior. And as we learn then, we'll learn again now. Rab Shimon ben Gamliel Omer Shtei Shabbosos. You're only obligated to delve into the halachos of the upcoming Chag 2 weeks out. You don't need to do more than 2 weeks. V'chimati reish yarcha merachkin le asi lezilzule b'chametz. The concern over here, says the Gemara, is that the reason why Rav Nachman says that it's me'ubar and mekudash is because we need it to be that people are going to be aware that we have a Hilchos Pesach issue coming up of chametz. So Amar Le, Rava says back to Rav Nachman, Meida Yedia Deshata Ma'avarta B'Chushbon Atalia Milsa. Everybody knows that there are cheshbonos to make about Pesach. Amre, they're going to say Chushbonahu de lo salik lu l'Rabbanon ad hashta. We're not going to make any mistakes with chametz. Don't worry. Yes, chametz is a mixture kares, but don't worry, we don't have anything to worry about. L'maisa, at the end of the day, people know. You got to call the rabbi. What do you think is going to happen? This guy's going to start eating matzah on a Tuesday night out of the blue? No, the Rav's going to give drashas. Okay, Rabbosai, Pesach is next month. We'll talk. We figure things out. I don't think that's ever happened where someone started celebrating Hanukkah a week early, a week late. I once, back in the day, got a haircut the week before Lag BaOmer, thinking it was Lag BaOmer. I did that once. The person who caught me was Rabbi Reisman. He's like, "What happened? Why do you have such a clean?" I'm like, "What? It's Lag BaOmer." He's like, "No, it's not. That's next Sunday." And it was very embarrassing. I was a mole, but I didn't have a bris then. It was a brand new mole in Bekoshi. It was a long time ago, actually. It's in the old building on Tui. So says the Gemara, we're not really so concerned. No one's going to start Pesach early. It's such a whole halabalut to start Pesach. All the cook, you're not going to get away. No one's going to make an error like that. All right, let's get into the tough stuff. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Ein ma'aber nesashana. We are not going to be ma'aber a new year. Ela im kein haisat kufa chasera ruba shel chodesh. Again, very, very cryptic language. I'm going to just say it outside and then we'll look back at the language. The seasons follow the sun, 91 days at a time. The lunar calendar, as the art scroll likes to say, intercalate. I don't know. It's a word that nobody uses. But we're going to mix together the lunar and solar calendars in a particular way. Now, because these two calendars don't always align perfectly, in fact, they rarely ever align perfectly, so it could be that a season will end at any point, the summer months will end at any point during Tishrei. So says the Gemara, we're not going to be ma'aber unless the tkufa of the summer is chasera ruba shel chodesh, is missing most of the month of that month, which is Tishrei. And the Gemara says on the bottom line of Yud Beis Mud Beis, v'kama rubo shel chodesh shisha asar yom divi Rabbi Yehuda. If the season of the summer, if the summer months end on the 16th of the month of Tishrei or later, then we are me'aber. We're so far along, we're far along enough, I should say, that we have a degree of concern about our schedule, and therefore we're going to potentially be me'aber. Says the Gemara at the top of Yud Gimel Amud Aleph, that's only true according to Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Echad ve'esrim yom, up to the 21st day. Up until that point, we will not be ma'aber. After that point, we will be ma'aber. Again, that's the language of Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Ein ma'aber nesashana ela im kain. We have to make sure that it's going to be a certain amount into the month of Tishrei. V'shneim mikra echad darshu. Both of them, the ones who say that we're talking about 16 days into the month of Tishrei, which the 16th of the month, the 16th. Yeah. It says the Gemara that we're talking about Ushnei Mikra Echad Darshu Chag HaAsif Tkufas HaShana. What's Chag HaAsif? Chag HaAsif is Sukkot. So we're gathering things in Tkufas HaShana. The 15th of the month of Tishrei is the first day of Yontif. The 16th is the first day of Chol HaMoed, not in Chutz La'aretz, but in the Torah, the 16th is Chol HaMoed. So says the Gemara, Chag HaAsif, the days in which we gather. Which days of Sukkot are we allowed to gather on? You can't gather on day 1, on the 15th. You can't gather on day 22. Both of those days are Asr b'Malacha. And to gather from the field is Me'amer, among a host of other potential malachos. Says the Gemara, Mar savar kulei chag ba'inan betkufa chadasha. According to one shita, we need the entire Chol HaMoed to be part of the new tkufa. So that's going to be the shita of Rabbi Yehuda, that on the 16th and onward, that's going to be the end of the summer and into the fall, into Stav, into the fall season. Umar Sabar, the other shita of Rabbi Yossi, says, Mixas chag ba'inan betkufa chadasha. We only need some of that new month, of that new season, I should say, to be in the, some of that new month to be in the new, and to be in the new season of the fall. That's what the Gemara says. It says the Gemara, this doesn't work. Let's just review what exactly we're saying over here. Shita number 1 says that if we get up to the 16th of the month, then we're not going to be ma'aber. If we get to the 16th of the month, we will be ma'aber. We're going to discuss in a minute if it's ad bichlal, ad below ad bichlal. The 16th is ikr. The other shita says 21. It says the Gemara on Yud Gimel Amud Aleph, 5 lines down, my kasavre. I don't understand. What is it that you hold? I kasavre yom tkufa gomer, that the day that the season ends is registered to the previous. Because of course, when we say that a season is 91.3 days long, that 0.3 could be unforgiving. It could land at 2 p.m. We don't know when it started. It certainly isn't a midnight to midnight ordeal. That's for sure. So here what the Gemara is saying, what happens if the season ends at noon? Ika savre yom tkufa gomer, that the day of this tkufa is the completing tkufa, namely it's ending the summer months. Then belav hachinami, then forget this day. Lo lamanda amar kule chagika, v'lo lamanda amar mixas chagika. These numbers don't make any sense. If what we're saying is that both of these Tanaim are rooted in the pasuk of Chag HaAsif, that Chol HaMoed has to play a role here, Chol HaMoed will play a role according to nobody if you say that the day goes with the previous. Why? Because if the 16th is going with the previous, then no Chol HaMoed was involved. And if the 22nd was going with the previous, then no Chol HaMoed was involved according to Rabbi Yossi. Ella says the Gemara, you're right, Kosavre Yom Tkufa Maschil. That when we talk about the 16th we treat as the beginning of the new season of the fall, in which case we do have a day that is in the new season of the fall, both according to Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi. Says the Gemara, you can't say this. And we're going to now ask a double question on our approach that will end in a kasha, as if the Gemara wasn't hard enough. Now we're going to ask a question that seems unanswerable from the Shaklavataria. Meisvei, how can you say that these are the shitas of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi? Yom Tkufa Gomer, Tivir Rabbi Yehuda. We just said a second ago that it's Yom Tkufa Maschil, that we look at these days as the beginning of the new season, not as the end of the previous season. Yet what do we see over here in the name of Rabbi Yehuda? Yom Tkufa Gomer, exact opposite of what we just said. And Rabbi Yossi Omer, like we did see earlier, Yom Tkufa Maschil. So we see a stira within Rabbi Yehuda. The Od Tanya, and furthermore, we have a problem with another brisa. And in this brisa that we're about to see, which is a Tosefta here in Sanhedrin, we're going to see a number of shitas that don't align with what we just learned, and therefore the Gemara will end in a kasha. So here's our second question. We're a third of the way down on Yud Gimel Amud Aleph. Ein me'aber nesas shana. Well, like we already saw, you're not allowed to be me'aber. Ela im ken haisa tkufa chasera rubo shel chodesh. Like we said, that the season of the summer has to end after a majority of the month of Tishrei. And says the Gemara, V'kama rubo shel chodesh shisha asar yom, 16 days. So 16 days on the bottom of the previous page was the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda. Now Rabbi Yehuda holds something different. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Shtei Yados B'chodesh. Shtei Yados B'chodesh is a language of 20 days. It's 2 yados, 2 hands. Each yad is 10. And that's what the Gemara means. Rabbi Yehuda, that's Rabbi Yehuda Shita. We already see a steer in Rabbi Yehuda Nachamol. That's 2 steers in Rabbi Yehuda. The Kama Shtei Yados B'chodesh Kaf Yom. According to Rabbi Yehuda, that's 20 days. And then Rabbi Yossi, who on the top of this page told us 20 days. Let's see what he says over here. Rabbi Yossi Amar Mechashben Shisha Asar Lifnei HaPesach Me'abrin. We make a decision 16 days before Pesach. We've been talking about Sukkot. We haven't been talking about Pesach. So now he's throwing us back 2 seasons, 6 months, 180 days, 91 times 2. It's 182, 2 seasons. He's taking us back 2 seasons. Shisha Asar Lifnei HaChag Ein Ma'abrin. However, 16 days before Sukkot, as opposed to Pesach, we are not going to be Ma'abr. So again, Reb Yossi is now Soser himself. Reb Shimon, which is a Shita that we didn't see in the Brisa, on the bottom of Yud Beis and Mid Beis. But there, Reb Shimon Omer, we're halfway down. Shisha Asar Lifnei HaChag Ma'abrin. He disagrees with Reb Yossi. And he says that 16 days before the Chag, we will be Ma'abr. We'll make that math equation 16 days before Sukkot. So that is, what's that date? That's the last day of Adar. That's the last day of Elul. That's the last day of Elul. Achei Ramonim, yet another Shita. Mi'uto. It's all about the minority. We're aiming for cryptic today, and we're hitting it out of the park. What are you talking about? V'kama mi'uto arba asar yom. Now, we're not going to dig into this Shita now. We will speak about it more on the Amud Beis. But the Gemara says, after seeing all of this, Kasha, we have so many differences between the 2 Brisas we just presented and the Brisa that we started with today. The first stira we had is that on the top of this page, on Yud Gimel Amud Aleph, we had determined that Rabbi Yehuda was saying that the last day of a season doesn't go to the new season, but it's included in the last season, even if the minute that the season ended was noon. We don't care. We always have to give you the whole day to one season or another. That was stira number 1. And stira number 2 is that Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi in the Brisa on Yud Gimel Amud Aleph are not holding the same as they were in the Brisa on the bottom of Yud Beis and Mid Beis. So to this, the Gemara says, Kasha. Very, very difficult. And when we say the word Kasha, what we're really doing is questioning the Shita Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Where we started this particular sugya was 3 lines from the bottom on Yud Beis and Mid Beis, where we had said in the name of Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel of Ein Me'aber Nes Hashana, unless it crossed a certain threshold in Tishrei. So that's what the Gemara says. Very, very difficult sugya. Very difficult sugya. Okay, next, a little bit more than halfway down, Amar Mar. Let's now analyze the brisa that we just saw. We had said Rabbi Yehuda Omer Shtei Yados B'chodesh was Esrim Yom, and we had said that Rabbi Yossi Omer Mechashben Shisha Asar Yom Lifnei HaPesach Me'abrin, and the Gemara says Hainu Rabbi Yehuda. This Shita of Rabbi Yossi is actually no different than the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda. Now, it's very difficult to see how this is true. Took me a very long time to even understand the English version of this. So I'll do my best. But if you pay attention closely, I think we'll be able to see it. Where the Gemara says, Amar Mar, Rabbi Yehuda says, Shtei Yados is 20 days. That up to 20 days, we're not Ma'aber. If it goes into 20 days in Tishrei, we are Ma'aber. Rabbi Yossi says that we calculate 16 days before Pesach. Now here's the part where the math kicks in. I'm not going to take out a calendar, though I probably should have. What he is saying is 16 days before Pesach, plus 2 91-day seasons is also the 20th of Tishrei. We wouldn't have known that. But the math works out exactly the same way, which means that the Shita of Rabbi Yossi and the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda sound exactly the same. So sure. Rabbi Yehuda was giving us a time frame in the month of Tishrei. He said the line in the sand is the 20th day of the month of Tishrei. The calculation that Rabbi Yossi was making was not from Tishrei, it was from Pesach. But the line in the sand by Pesach, when you add 2 91-day seasons, is the same 20th of Tishrei. Yeah. And therefore, they're the same shitas. Why did he phrase it that way? We're going to see the answer right now. But on its face, we didn't understand anything. But once we explained it on its new face, it looks like they're saying the same thing. Rabbi Yehuda is saying the 20th of Tishrei directly. Rabbi Yossi is saying it in a backwards way, but it's still saying the same thing, Lamaisa. In the month of Tishrei, when you hit the 20th, that's the line in the sand for when we're ma'aber. And the Gemara says, don't worry, Yom Tkufa Gomer, the Yom Tkufa Maschel Ikabenayu. It depends how you calculate each of those ends of season. If each of the ends of season go with the previous day, then you have the end of the one by Pesach, the end of the next two, that's a 3-day difference. So that would be one huge difference between them as to whether or not we calculate the Yom Tkufa Gomer or Yom Tkufa Maschil. Do we calculate that last day of a season as going with the prior or going with the latter? So you're right that if you were to add 91 days, that it would equal the 20th of Tishrei, but only if Yom Tchila Gomer. So therefore, the cases, the shitas are not exactly the same. Again, another difficult, somewhat mathematical Gemara. And 8 lines from the bottom, Omar Mar, he says, Shisha Asar Lifnei Hachag Ein Ma'abrin. Mar, in the Tanakama, told us 16 days before the Chag. That's Sukkot. Remember, the language of Chag is Sukkot. We have to keep our seasons correct. He says Ein Ma'abrin. Rabbi Yossi, Shisha Asar Lifnei Hachag Hudalo. According to Rabbi Yossi, he agrees that when it comes to 16 days before Sukkot, you're not going to be Ma'aber. But what does that imply? Hoshivsar v'tamnesar me'abrin. But if you're 17 days or 18 days before the Chag, you might be me'aber at that point if you make the cheshbon. But how can that be? Ve'amar shisha asar lifnei pesach in batir lo. But there are other Mar Mekomos that say that you're not allowed to do that. Only 16 and not any less than that. So how can it be that we have such an implication? The Gemara says, lo, your implication is incorrect. Idi v'idi ein me'abrin. 16th and 17th and 18th, all of those are ein me'abrin. But why then did it say 16? V'aydi de tana reisha shisha asar lifnei pesach, tana nami shisha asar lifnei achag. We're just mirroring language. As we know, the better cadence that a Mishnah has, the easier it was to memorize. And because of that, the Shita of Rabbi Yossi left an implication that was incorrect. And one more analysis of the Brisa that we saw, 2 lines from the bottom. Yud Gimel Amud Aleph. Reb Shimon Omer, Af Shisha Asar Lifnei Hachag Me'abrin. Reb Shimon argued that even 16 days before the Chag, we would be Me'aber. And if you look back in the beginning of the Brisa, where it says Omar Mar 6 lines ago, Hainu Tanakama, that's exactly what the Tanakama said of Shisha Asar Lifnei Hachag, Ein Me'abrin. Sounds exactly the same. So says the Gemara, turning to the top of Yud Gimel Amud Beis, Yika Beinaihu, a similar difference of Yom Tkufa Maschil v'Yom Tkufa Gomer v'Lo Mesayme. The machlokas that we would have between the Tanakama and the Shita of Reb Shimon is whether or not we look at the final day of a season as going with the past season or with the future season, and all of the chips will fall properly. However, v'Lo Mesayme, we don't know which Shita holds what. We don't know what Reb Shimon holds of the Tanakama. We have no way of determining. So says the Gemara, Maika Savre, I'm not sure I understand your Shita. Ika Savre, Yom Tkufa Gomer, V'kulechag Ba'inan Ha'ika. If you want to say that it goes with the end of the season, and we will be Ma'aber if the whole Chag is there, well then, you got it. Good to go. So how then do we understand this Shita? So the Gemara says, Amar of Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak Acherem v'tkufas Nisan Kaime. They weren't talking about the Chag. They weren't talking about Sukkot. They were talking about Pesach. Tichsiv Shamor es Chodesh Ha'aviv. Shmor Ha'aviv Shel Tkufa Shei B'Chodesh Nisan. We're not talking about Sukkot. We're talking about Nisan. So the Gemara says, if that's true, then what we should do is, because we're only talking about a portion of that month, of half of that month, what we should have done is we should have been Ma'aber and added one more day to the previous Adar, because then the 91st day would have fallen out a day earlier, and we would have prevented needing to add another whole month to the year. So Amar Rav Acha bar Yaakov Tana milamala lamata kachashiv. You're not wrong, but the math was being done in a different way. What does this mean? V'hachi ka'amar, and we're 10 lines down or so on Yud Gimel Amud Beis. V'hachi ka'amar, ad mi'uto me'abrin, up until a minimum we will be me'aber. V'kama mi'uto, arba asar yom, we're talking about 14 days, but from the top of the month. So there's 29 days in the month. of Nisan, and when you subtract 14, you're down to 15, and that is one day of that yontif. Ravina argues, Ravina Amar La'olam Acherim B'Tishrei Kaimi. No, don't change the case. We weren't talking about Pesach, we were talking about Tishrei. Because Savre Acherim Kulei Chag Ba'inan, the Yom Tov Rishon. We need even the first day of the Yantif to be a part of this in order to not be Me'aber. But because the first day was included, we had to then be Me'aber. Says the Gemara, how can you say that? Yom Tov Rishon Chag HaAsif Ksiv. You can't gather anything on Yom Tov Rishon. How can you assume that the Yom Tov Rishon has to be included in the post-season, in the new season, in order to be Me'aber? You can't gather anything. It's usher. It says the Gemara, Chag haba bizman asifat. Oh, that's easy to wriggle out of. No problem. The Gemara says over there that we're only talking about the season of Chag HaAsif, not the day of Chag HaAsif. So I'm just going to loosely summarize what we learned. We're always concerned about the blend between these two calendars. And one of the ways that we try to keep things safe in regards to Chag HaAsif and Chag HaAviv is by making emendations to our calendars, to the solar calendar in particular, to make sure that it stems with the Gregorian solar calendar. Gregorian's not the right word, but with the solar calendar. So they were looking out and saying, what should we do? Where are our lines in the sand? Yesterday and the day before, we learned about mitigating factors. What about hunger? What about logistics? What about roads and bridges? And today we're learning a kind of like a higher level modification, kind of like more of a formulaic way to know when to do that. And it was really based on when the seasons would fall out. If the seasons were really off the mark, if the summer was ending super late, so then we needed to adjust. We needed to figure that out. And that is exactly what all of this Gemara was talking about. I know this Gemara is difficult, and it would require of us to spend a good week just really picking apart each of the layers of this Gemara. We, of course, don't have time for that. I hope I've done justice. A third of the way down, and we'll be learning another until 2/3 to the bottom of the page, and then we'll stop. A third of the way down, the Gemara says, Smichas Zikenim, a much easier topic. Tanu Rabbanan, the pasuk says, V'samchu ziknei, yachol ziknei hashuk, who does smicha? Any old guy walking down the street with a cane? Anybody? Everyone's eligible? Talmud Lomar Eda. No, it has to be from a certain cut of humanity. Eda yachol k'tanei Eda. Maybe it's from, okay, they're chashuv, but maybe they're like regular B'nai Torah. Talmud Lomar Ha Eda, with the letter Hey, Hey HaMiyuchad. And the Gemara says, Miyuchadim shebe'eda. It has to be top shelf Rabbanim Chashuvim Dayanim. Those are the ones who have to do smicha. The Kamahain. How many Edim do we need? So the Gemara says, well, the Samchu from the Pasuk is Shnayim, and Zikne from the Pasuk is another Shnayim. 2 + 2 is 4. The Ein Bezdin Shakul. You're not allowed to have an even Bezdin because we don't want cases to end in a tie. Mosif and Aleino Echad Harekan Chamisha Diver Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda was of the opinion that we needed to have 5 Edim for smicha. So that would be the 5 Edim who would witness the Kohanim doing smicha or the Balabatim doing smicha on the animal. Reb Shimon Omer Ziknei Shnaim, and he is not Doresh, the word V'samchu. That's going to be our upcoming question. According to the first sheet of Rabbi Yehuda is that we learn 2 from Samchu and 2 from Ziknei, why doesn't Reb Shimon learn from the word Samchu? But Reb Shimon only learns from the word Ziknei, which is Shnaim. Ve'ein bezin shakal mosif le'no rechad rekan shlosha. So there's a machlokes tanoim by smicha zikenim. Do we need 3 or 5? According to the shita that said we need 5, we learned from the word V'samchu and from the word Ziknei. And according to the shita that we need 3, we only learned from the word Ziknei. I Reb Shimon haksiv V'samchu. You've got the same chumash we do. So why is it that one Tana is learning 2 of the Eidim from the word Samchu, and you are not learning anything from the word V'samchu? Says the Gemara, Hahumi Baile Legufe. The word V'samchu over there can't be used for a drasha to teach me how many Eidim we need. That's teaching me the fundamental chiyuv of smicha bichlal. The word V'samchu means you have to do smicha. You can't use that to tell me how many Eidim there are. So therefore, the sheet of Reb Shimon says V'samchu is not available. I, Reb Yehuda, if Reb Shimon is learning the basic din of smicha from the word v'samchu, but you're using the word v'samchu for edim, then where do you learn the basic din of samchu from? Of smicha. He says, L'gufei lo tzarech. We don't need to learn the fundamentals of smicha from the word v'samchu. Dim kain delo asi v'samchu l'drasha. We didn't need that word. It could have been written differently. Lichtov ziknei ha'eda yedehem al rosh hapar. Why? It's actually missing a word here. It should have said v'samach. So says the Gemara, we don't need that. So the word v'samchu is extra. So because it's extra, therefore I'm going to darshan it. That's why we need 5. The Reb Shimon says, you can't say that. Had it only said v'samach, havamina mai al, that when the pasuk says v'samchu ziknei ha'ida es yedehem al rosh hapar, I might have thought that without the word v'samchu, it would have been b'samuch, that you only have to put your hands near the head of the animal, but not actually on the head of the animal. I, Rabbi Yehuda, I don't have to worry about that. Gamar rosh me'ola. He said, I don't have to worry about that. I know by an ola, the pasuk is mefurash that you have to put your hand on the ola's head, and it says rosh in both psukim. So I know over here too that we need to put the hands on the head. I don't need the drasha of v'samchu to teach me that. I, Reb Shimon, don't worry. Lo gamar rosh me'ola. He doesn't learn that. And because he doesn't learn that, he needs the word v'samchu to teach us the fundamental din. And because he needs that to be available for that fundamental din, then we have to do smicha on the rosh. So therefore, it's not available for the drasha of how many edim there are. Therefore, he holds that there are only 3 edim. We'll stop right here at Tana, 12 lines or so from the bottom of the page on Yud Gimel Amud Beis. Wishing you all a beautiful night.